Have you ever wondered what's really going on behind the music you love? I mean, beyond the famous faces you see on the album covers, there's almost always a hidden story, a secret group of artists who were the ones actually creating the sounds that defined a whole generation. And today, we're going to uncover one of rock and pop's biggest secrets.
So let's start with a simple question about one of the most famous songs ever made, the Beach Boys' Good Vibrations. We all know it, we all know the band, but who was actually in the studio that day, playing those instruments and creating that absolutely revolutionary sound? Well, the answer, it's probably not who you think.
And this really gets to the heart of the whole story. You see, on one side you have the image, the famous artists we all know and celebrate. But on the other side you have the sound, and that was often crafted by these unseen, anonymous professionals. This was the real dynamic of the music industry back in its golden age. So you have to ask, why? Why did this happen? How did this separation between the face of the music and the sound of the music become the standard? Well, to get that, we have to go back and look at the intense, unique pressures of the 1960s music business. It was a real pressure cooker. You see, the 60s saw this massive explosion in the demand for new music. Radio and television were everywhere, and they created this absolutely insatiable hunger for new songs. Pretty soon, the pressure to churn out perfectly polished radio-ready hits was just more than most touring bands could possibly handle. And so, the recording studio kind of transformed into its own thing, a hit factory totally separate from the live concert stage. And this whole high-pressure environment, it created a need for a totally new kind of musician. This wasn't about being a rock star. This was about being a studio virtuoso, someone who could walk into any session for any artist and just nail a perfect take every single time. Fast. For the producers, making a hit record basically became an assembly line. It was a process. Step 1, get a great song from a songwriter. Step 2, book the famous singer or the band. And then step 3, this was the secret ingredient, assemble a team of expert musicians who could lay down a flawless instrumental track with incredible speed and skill. So, who was this secret team of experts? Well, it's time to finally meet the anonymous architects behind the sound of an entire era. They were called the Wrecking Crew. It was this informal but absolutely elite group of studio musicians based in Los Angeles. These are the names you've probably never heard, who played on thousands, and I mean thousands, of hit songs you definitely know by heart. They are the answer to our mystery. So what made these musicians so essential? Well, you could honestly call them musical superpowers. They were like chameleons. They could jump from surf rock to R&B to pop without missing a beat. They were also incredible arrangers, turning a simple demo into a huge production. They were the engine room, providing those unforgettable drum fills and bass grooves. And, maybe most importantly, they worked with this flawless efficiency that saved producers a ton of time and money in the studio. The sheer scale of their work is, well, it's staggering. So let's just look at a few examples to really see how deeply their sound is buried in the DNA of the music from that era. Okay, let's go back to that first question about Good Vibrations. That iconic drumming, that was a Wrecking Crew legend named Hal Blaine. And the groundbreaking, melodic bass lines on the entire Pet Sounds album, that was the brilliant Carol Kaye. Now, Brian Wilson was the genius, the visionary, no doubt. But he relied on the Wrecking Crew to actually bring his incredibly complex musical ideas to life. And their importance is just impossible to overstate. I mean, think about Phil Spector's famous wall of sound. That sound, that whole concept, it simply could not have existed without them. On huge hits like Be My Baby by the Ronettes, it was the Wrecking Crew who layered all those instruments with military precision to create that one massive sound. But their reach went so much further. They laid down the sophisticated folk rock foundation for the Mamas and the Papas on Monday Monday. And yeah, that was Hal Blaine again, providing that powerful driving rhythm for Neil Diamond's Sweet Caroline. They were literally everywhere. And here's the crucial point, maybe the most important part of all, their anonymity. That was actually their greatest asset. Because nobody knew who they were, they could be the secret ingredient in everyone's recipe for a hit. They were the ultimate musical ghosts in the machine. All of this, it kind of builds to a much bigger idea, right? It's about art. It's about who gets the credit and what it really means to be a creator. Their whole story forces us to ask a really fundamental question. When you contribute so much to art that literally shapes culture, but nobody knows your name, does that diminish the genius?
I mean, does genius even need a name to be real? The research on this really captures the idea perfectly. Their story challenges our entire concept of artistic credit. It really pushes back against this myth we have of the lone genius and reminds us that so much of the greatest art is actually a deep, deep collaboration. And that gets you to their motivation. Think about it. So many artists are driven by what we call extrinsic rewards, fame, awards, the applause. But the Wrecking Crew? They seem to be fueled by something purely intrinsic. It was a deep passion for the music itself, the satisfaction of perfecting their craft, and just the pure joy and challenge of creating something great.
Ultimately, here's the big takeaway. You may not have known their names before today, but I guarantee you have known their sound your entire life. It is the sonic DNA of countless songs that are just burned into our collective memory. So the next time you hear a classic from the 60s or 70s, listen a little closer. Listen for those unseen architects and wonder, what other invisible geniuses are hiding in plain sight?